they don't help you. They're a bad company. They'll do everything they can to make sure you don't get a valid estimate that'll take care of your damage and compensate you for it. That's it. Don't ever buy them.
So she wants to know what happened with Allstate. What happened is my mother had a pipe break, and if you go onto the website I put up for her, AllstateStinks.com, you can see, and she had water damage. It flooded her kitchen, it flooded half of her dining/bedroom, her stairwell, and her basement. And this was -6 degrees, so there's a big iceberg on the side of her house. The doors frozen over, and the water ended up pushing through her foundational walls, so it destroyed those rooms. And that was after coming back from seeing the doctor for her back surgery. And then we called Allstate up for help, and and they said, well, we'll get Servpro out there to help you. And we called the fire department. Get through the door, they couldn't bust through the door because it was too thick. They basically ruined the door. They couldn't just chip away the ice. So we could call, wait till they're done with it.
So we had a locksmith come out, and he ended up getting in the front door. When we opened the door, we were hit by a bunch of damp air. You could see water dripping on the front door, which is the farthest part away from where the damage was, and you could just smell the water. I looked through there and you could see water dripping from the ceiling. So as I walked toward the kitchen, you could see water dripping from the ceiling, and you could smell the dampness, and you could smell mold. And in the ceiling, the light was still on, and there was water in the actual ceiling light. And it was unsafe for my mom to go in there because the electric's still on. So Servpro said they were going to take care of it. What they did is they came out, but they didn't put any drying equipment in. They didn't do anything. They said, we'll get to it in the morning. So, and this has been sitting probably for 2 days. My mother was at a doctor's appointment. When they came out,
because it was holiday.
I'm not sure if it was a holiday, Mom. So when they came out the following day, they didn't really do much. I think they put a couple pieces of equipment in, some air dryers. They put in some equipment that wasn't an industrial dryer, just like a dehumidifier. But usually when you put a dehumidifier and you can see that water comes out, well, there's no water coming out of these things. And these guys didn't take any of the wet stuff out of my mom's house, and the following day, as the day progressed, they didn't do anything. So I had to talk to Allstate about this, and what Allstate said was, my mother doesn't have insurance sufficient for them to take down the wet drywall, which I thought is absolutely absurd. This is a recorded conversation I actually have tucked away somewhere with an Allstate representative for my mother. What Servpro ended up doing is if you look on the website AllstateStinks.com for my mom, you can see a little tiny piece, maybe a 1.5 foot by 2 foot section of ceiling they chipped away, but the entire ceiling was flooded. And that's all Servpro did. They were fired. I hired another local company to Lorraine, which I would never recommend, Menco Construction, who then came out. They did tear down all the wet stuff. They said what Servpro did is not right, that my mother's policy does cover taking down wet drywall. They took it down. It still smelled like mold. They said they were going to take care of it. My mother had, old electric, old plumbing. They said, hey, we're going to take care of all these upgrades for you. Don't worry. He said, by the way, it's just a small thing. It's just a pipe we move from the outside of the wall to the inside of the wall so that this doesn't pop and bust again. It seemed reasonable to me. When they started to do the work, they took everything out. If you go again on the website, you can see what they took out. Then when it came time to start the rebuild phase, I talked to them because there's ice pushed through the foundation wall. They said, hey, we're probably going to have to get a structural engineer out there to take a look at this because there's ice through a foundation. They just didn't answer any of that question. I talked to them about the supervisor came on site, different than the owner that promised all this stuff, and he said, oh, yeah, we routinely take down this stuff, and you know, your mom's gonna have to pay some money here for these upgrades. She's gonna have to pay for the plumbing and for this electric, and you know, it might be like $5,000-10,000, kind of feeling me out, which is completely against what the owner said. So I sent the owner an email, and the owner's response is just that he avoids the email. And then you know, my mom's furnace died about a day into this water damage. It had been running faithfully for years. I asked Allstate about this after getting an estimate from a local furnace person, and Allstate's adjuster all of a sudden was on vacation. And then I called the other person that's supposed to cover, and they're no longer there. Then when I do get a hold of somebody, mysteriously, even though the fax machine says they got a confirmation for the estimate that shows water damage attributable to this claim, they said they did not get this estimate. I copied the company that's supposed to take care of this, Venco, on this. Their response as well is to just ignore this question. Then my mother and I were put up in a local hotel. Allstate did contact the hotel and take care of that for that first day or for the first day or two.
I paid it.
My mom, I think they took care of it. My mom might be mistaken. At any rate, so then in the course of doing down kind of finishing up the tear down, starting to do the rebuild, the Venco supervisor says something that really caught my ear. He says, you know what? When I said, you know, I think there's mold, and I think we need to take care of this. The owner assured me they'd take care of any mold issues. But the supervisor said, you know what, mold's really not an issue. But you know what, these old homes, there's plenty of asbestos in these walls, by the way. As he was chipping it down, he was like chipping it down by my mom's kitchen and telling me this. So I'm thinking that there's something wrong with this person. If his workers had no masks on, no eye protection, he didn't cover anything in the room, and he's telling me that his workers routinely go into homes and tear down this building material which has asbestos. I think this guy is not all together. So I had called the owner up, and I talked to him of Venco Construction. I asked him about this. He assured me he would send somebody out to take a look at this damage. He hired another company, I think A1 Help, an independent contractor in the county my mother lives in. And they came out. His first response, I recorded this whole meeting with him, and his response was, "Oh, nothing is mold. There's no mold. There's nothing. You know, I'll go ahead. I'll clean this stuff up. What's left? You know, there's a little bit of dirt here." And Allstate told me not to pay Venco because they had not cleaned it up. You know, there's a check for the cleanup. The Allstate rep said, "Don't pay them until it's done, and your mother is satisfied." Because she was saying, right, that they didn't run a vacuum cleaner. Did they? Did they vacuum anything, Mom? Did they use any soap and water to clean anything?
There is no water. The water is the one that was the problem. They were supposed to fix it.
Yeah, so my mother had a pipe break, and these guys aren't even turning water on to use soap and water to clean her home.
They can't.
After.
They cannot do it.
So
they brought the dirty mop the next day.
my mom's saying they brought dirty mops the next day.
And I had to clean it.
So,
that was the first time.
and so my mom is sitting there at her age trying to clean her own house. So I talked to this representative that was sent out, and his position was they didn't do anything. There's no mold. There's no anything else wrong. Just we'll put the stuff that's left there, and we'll take it out and we'll begin. And so after the Menco's Construction's representative came out and denied everything, I hired an independent certified industrial hygienist. And he verified that it's an unsafe condition for my mother at her age with the mold and with the asbestos in the house. It's unlivable, was his comment. My mom and I are in a hotel through this when this is discovered. I called up Allstate to tell them, and they said that basically your time is up. We've paid enough for your hotel. See you later. We're not going to do anything. I told them I have a report. I called the state of Ohio. I filed a report with the state of Ohio Department of Insurance. So the state of Ohio Department of Insurance responds to me providing a copy of the report and the damage and asking for their help in getting hotel continued was go hire a lawyer. That's what they said. I hired a lawyer. What happened in the meantime is my mother ends up getting kicked out of the hotel. Tell them how you were kicked out of the hotel, Mother. Speak up.
She's the one that came to me and she says, you have to pay the money. I'm going to call the police if I don't get the money. So I said, you want to get it? I don't have it. I don't have it. I can't
Speak up.
So after that, we got our money and I went and paid it. But the hotel manager was downstairs threatened me with the police that they want to call the police to the result.
So because all of a sudden we're in a situation where we don't have access to any funds because Allstate's supposed to take care of this, we find ourselves having to go back down to my house in Cincinnati, Ohio, and her house is up in northern Ohio. And Allstate's just not responsive. And the attorney that we hired, instead of just calling them up and sorting out getting her hotel room taken care of, what he did is he gets a good idea, I think, to generate attorney fees. And he said, well, we're going to have to sit down with Allstate. So now at $200 per hour for 8 hours, he wants my mom to pay for this several months later instead of just writing a letter, instead of just calling up. And I didn't see a copy of any letter from him at that time to Allstate. I've got a file that's like this thick, times 10. So, you know, we try and work this out with after sitting down with Allstate, and what they said was,
Allstate told me that they're going to fix it for me. He told me, the one that
the adjuster with Allstate did all Davis told my mother he'd take care of everything.
but that was not the one that called. We bought it. That was not the Davis.
My parents' policy is 50 years old, and so and what Allstate does
They
is
never fixed anything.
what they said is my parents' policy for 50 years ago, all of a sudden somewhere in 1998 their policy lapsed. No letter for their policy lapsing. No notification, just mysteriously they have a new policy now, is what Allstate's position is. That has all these exclusions where their old policy didn't. So at any rate, we talked to Allstate in, I think, November, maybe October, for damages in January, and they gave money that was sufficient then to clean up some of the mess that was caused by the contractor, but not. They gave $22,000, but and Servpro itself, another franchise, did the estimate. But what they did is at first they refused to do any of the work. The attorney said, "Don't worry, deal with Servpro; they'll take care of it." When we found out that we got a check and said, "Well, look," and he assured me they'd work, they refused to do any work. They refused to do any of the cleanup. I needed neck surgery. My mother was going down for back surgery. Very difficult to follow up on this stuff. Then we were told that money is sufficient to cover all the damage for everything, all the secondary damage. Well, when I finally looked through the paperwork, I noticed that it didn't cover any of the asbestos damage. So on the second floor, for sure. My mom had duplex, her furnace is running continuously, and according to the hygienist, there's asbestos throughout her house because of this carelessness. So the attorney says, "Hey, don't worry. I know you guys are injured. I'm going to go ahead and I asked Allstate, can you name somebody else to do it if Servpro can?" Allstate says basically you're on your own. There are no other contractors that we're gonna name for you. The attorney said he's going to take care of this, and as the year goes on, instead of having his associate call and take care of this, he says, "Oh, I never said that. That never happened. Sorry." And I'm looking at Allstate's contract on this supposed new policy, and their contract's says if you don't do anything in a year, you're out of luck. That's basically what it says. You have no right to take them to court after a year. Well, the attorney should have known this. He does business with insurance companies, right? Mysteriously, he didn't say anything about this deadline. I'm realizing there's, that the second company caused the asbestos damage, the first company caused the mold damage, and if the second company does such bad work, maybe they didn't do a good estimate, and maybe they didn't, and their structural damage is valid. So I called in a structural engineer, and he validated what I'm saying, that all the wood that's in her ceiling needs to be double butted up because it's water damage and needs to be supported. Subfloor as well, and the foundation as well needs to be fixed to the point that it's not going to have a problem. Allstate just refused to deal with any of this stuff. They said, well, you got the money, you just need to use that money, and that's it. That's for secondary damage. That wasn't and that was not estimated secondary damage. That was just, hey, here's the money to pay for the moldy couches, the moldy clothes, the contents, the carpeting, this sort of stuff, and run a vacuum cleaner. So I had sent Allstate the engineer's estimate. I had asked for another estimate from a local company, Platinum Restoration, which later ended up doing business with Allstate. And their estimate, our estimate to rebuild initially was $32,000. Platinum's estimate was $47,000. And Allstate just said, sorry, you know what? You sent this to us too late. Now, for some reason, we couldn't get, we're in Cincinnati, her house is up north in Ohio, and without the funds that we had to spend to get to that point, over $15,000 in additional living, which remains to this date unpaid, and there's at least $3,000 of that's within a period where Allstate doesn't dispute. They just flat out refuse to pay anything. They just say we've done everything and ignore you. So we don't really have the funds to pay for the additional hotels because they're trying to starve you for cash. And then Allstate's response to the estimate is it's just too late. Sorry, you got it too late. Bye bye. Take care. Well, and my mother doesn't have any of her contents. What the second company does, and what's kind of a little bit of a spiel, I think, between Allstate and their contractors are. Their contractors said, hey, we'll take all this stuff and we'll catalog it for you. We'll make a nice list. And then you can have that submitted to the insurance company. If there's anything that can be recovered, we'll recover it. What they did, they just took everything out of her kitchen. They didn't catalog anything. And Allstate just gave you whatever they thought they wanted to, and that was it. That was their way of dealing with it. Her appliances were damaged. When I was able to finally get appliances and send them the bill, Allstate's response is, oh, sorry, that's just a little bit too late for us. We're not going to go ahead and reimburse you. You didn't listen to our guidelines here. But my mom had also had, while this is going on, 3 or 4 break-ins in her home to deal with at the same time. And Allstate causes as much problem with those break-ins as they do with their initial claim.
We never had a break-in before.
And my mom's a senior citizen. It's not like Allstate gives any consideration for how they communicate or the length of time of the response or anybody with special needs. Allstate just does not care. Like there's no, it's like you follow our guideline or that's it. See you later. They will not give you a time that you can talk to them. That's how they get out of doing anything. They'll send it to you by